Hello, everybody. This is Muqtadar Khan. I'm a professor of Islam and Global Affairs at the University of Delaware. I have been commissioned by Critical Connections to talk about the meaning and the impact of US troop withdrawal from Syria and Afghanistan and its impact on the region, particularly the Middle East. Let me make it clear in the very beginning that we are not withdrawing troops from either of those countries right away. The president did make that announcement. It will be a while before the details of the troop withdrawal will take place. And who knows, our president could change his mind and we may not actually see any troop withdrawal. But nevertheless, let's uh, look at two things: what it means if the United States were to withdraw from Syria and Afghanistan, and what impact will it have on the region. Number one, if the US does pull out from these two countries without achieving the goals that it has been talking about for the last 2 or 3 years, which is essentially establishing stable nations without terrorist groups and without terrorism, and hopefully with some form of budding democracies. And if the US leaves, then it will be considered a defeat. This will be another Vietnam without actually losing uh, significantly on the military basis. We would have lost politically. So that would be another defeat and a further argument for those who think that American power is receding, American impact globally is diminishing, and the fact that America is no more the superpower it once used to be. Its ability to impact global politics has become significantly less compared to what it was in the past. So that would undermine US hegemony, and it would become increasingly more difficult for the United States to assert and defend its global interests if it is seen as a waning power. The second thing is looking at the two countries specifically. The Taliban are really basically waiting for the United States to withdraw and then they will take over. So we will be back to 98, 99 when Taliban were ruling Afghanistan and Al Qaeda was building its base and training its fighters. That is what is going to happen to Afghanistan if the United States were to withdraw. Syria is a much more complicated situation. There are many players in Syria. The one side or one coalition is Bashar al-Assad and his regime and his allies, which are Russia, Iran, and Iran's proxy Hezbollah. And then you have the rebels who are completely diminished right now and not very well coordinated, but nevertheless, Syrians, predominantly Sunni opposition, which is still hoping to establish a regime by ousting Bashar al Assad. And then you have ISIS, a terrorist group in waiting. It had established a terrorist country, but now its fighters have dispersed, but it will take them very little time to regroup and acquire more territory if there is no major power combating them. And then, of course, you will have Turkey. Uh, and these groups all have various different interests, and they're all motivated by national interest and self interest. At the moment, the Turks are more interested in reducing the power and influence and territorial control of the Syrian Kurds and the Iraqi Kurds. They're not interested in fighting ISIS, even though they seem to say that. I do not see Turkey becoming the bulwark against ISIS that that President Erdogan has promised that Turkey would become if America were to withdraw. Turkey does not have the capacity or the resources to combat ISIS the way the United States has been doing all these years. So that's one issue. Russia and Iran have not really directly engaged with ISIS. They are more interested in consolidating Bashar al Assad's control over most of Syria and also ensuring that the Assad regime survives. So, who is going to fight ISIS if the United States were to go? And that is the question that President Trump has to really answer. And that is something that Americans have to worry. The fear is that if the United States were to withdraw from Syria militarily, then a mini ISIS Daesh state may emerge, which would be essentially a giant terrorist training camp, which will attract extremists from all over the world, train them, give them battle experience, and probably send them back to their countries. And the possibility that another 9/11 would happen subsequently increases exponentially. So that is the biggest threat and fear of this policy of the United States if it were to be implemented of withdrawal. It's not that the US has a significant military presence in Syria, but the intelligence and the air domination that the US maintains in the Syrian regime is critical to fighting ISIS. The impact of US withdrawal in the region will be devastating for South Asia. We will have, it'll be like a giant ISIS in South Asia. Afghanistan will become an extremist state. I do not expect the Taliban to come to power and just focus on domestic governance and providing good governance. They are an ideologically driven group, and their foreign and domestic policy will be more focused on realizing ideological goals of Islamization with their interpretation of Islam, which is not very appealing, truly speaking. And if the impact of the US withdrawal from Syria will be traumatic in the region, Israel is also worried and is already beginning to engage in Syrian affairs. So it is quite possible that we might see emerging spheres of influence in Syria where there will be pockets where Turkey will dominate and pockets where Israel will dominate and pockets where Iran will dominate and Russia. So it'll be like Germany after World War II, where there were four quarters, and that you might see that Syria will be divided territorially, at least in a de facto fashion, under control of several different powers. Unfortunately, I do not want to look too far into the future and speculate whether Syrian territorial integrity will survive this current crisis or not. But one thing will certain, it will become the epicenter of instability in the region. Not only will it continue to keep the Arab world and the Middle East unstable, but with the opportunities that it will provide to groups like ISIS to thrive, it will potentially become the epicenter, the source of all instability in the region, with implications for Europe particularly. And on that bleak note, I hope that the President of the United States will rethink his policies of withdrawal from both Afghanistan and Syria. Thank you.